There is a photograph that never made the wire services, not because no one took it, someone always takes it, but because the man whose job it was to decide what left that palace and what didn't had 31 years of service behind his eyes, and knew, with the particular certainty of men who have stood at the edge of catastrophe, that some moments are too load-bearing to survive being seen. I've been covering the royal household in an unofficial capacity for 11 years, and I've watched men in bearskin hats stand like furniture in a thunderstorm. I've watched them sweat through June without blinking. I've watched a senior household cavalry officer take a protester's paint balloon to the chest and not move. What I saw that afternoon in the corridor between the blue drawing room and the private East Wing, the quiet 30-foot stretch that tourists never reach, was different. It wasn't protocol that moved him. It wasn't training. It was something older than both, on something that happens when a man who has given his body to the crown suddenly finds himself caught between two women, a 6-month-old heir, and a moment that could rewrite everything, and has exactly 1 second to choose which version of history he wants to live in. I've been trying to write this story for 4 months. Every time I get close to the truth of it, something shifts. A detail I misremembered, a source who goes quiet, a timeline that doesn't line up with what I felt standing in that corridor, smelling old wood polish and the faint animal warmth of a child recently held. I'm not sure this story is about what I thought it was. I'm not sure it's about the guard at all. But I'll start there, because that's where it started. In the middle. Without warning. The way everything that matters always does. The baby was making that sound. Not crying. Not quite. The pressurized, a pre-cry sound that parents learn to parse the way sonar techs read signal. A bleat with a question mark at the end. A biological request filed in triplicate. I'd heard it through the half-open door before I rounded the corner, and I'd slowed my pace without knowing why, the way you slow near ice. I had no business being in that corridor. I want to be clear about that, because what I'm about to describe requires honesty about my own position. I had a lanyard, and I had a day pass for a background piece on the household division's ceremonial restructuring. A story nobody wanted to read, but everyone needed to print to justify the access budget. The press attaché had pointed me toward the public rooms. I'd nodded and gone the other direction, the way I always do, following the sound of something that felt like it mattered. The corridor was narrow and pale. William IV paneling on both sides, the kind of dark oak that absorbs sound rather than bouncing it. You feel dampened in there, like the building is listening better than you are. The floor was a runner of deep burgundy that had been walked thin in the exact center, a ghost path of 10,000 identical footsteps. He was standing at the far end, not at attention, not quite at ease either. The posture of a man who has been at attention so many times that it's become the baseline from which all other positions deviate. A negative space of formality. His uniform was the household cavalry dismounted review dress. Dark tunic, polished brass, the gorget tabs at his collar catching the light from a window he was positioned beside, with what I would later decide was deliberate precision. The bearskin was off, unusual, and I filed that detail somewhere. Now, you don't take the bearskin off unless you're inside an off ceremony. He was treating this corridor like a room. His name was Sergeant Declan Marsh. I only got that later. In the moment, he was just the architecture, part of the building, the way they trained them to be. I stopped when I saw the women. Kate was ahead of me, closer to Marsh, with Lewis against her chest in the particular grip of a mother who has learned that her children exist at the intersection of love and logistics. She was talking to someone on her phone, low and clipped, the Princess of Wales voice, not the public one with the pauses and the warmth, but the working one, efficient as a spreadsheet. Lewis was squirming. His hand kept finding her collar. Camilla was to Kate's left. I want to be precise here, because precision is the only thing I have. Camilla was not reaching for the baby in the way that reads as aggression or intention. She was doing the thing older women do around infants, the gravitational lean, the hands that drift outward like they're caught in a current. It is a completely human gesture. I've seen my own mother do it. It means give him to me, just for a moment. I miss the weight of something small. The question was whether Kate saw it that way. From the angle she was standing, phone still up, Louis turning his head toward the sound of Camilla's voice, because babies track familiar voices the way compasses find north. She may not have seen it at all. She may have felt it. The way you feel someone reaching into your peripheral vision before you see the hand. Marsh moved, not toward Camilla. That's the thing I've turned over 400 times since. He didn't intercept. He didn't step between them. He moved to Kate's right side. One step, maybe 18 inches, and said something. I was 40 feet away, and I couldn't hear the words. What I heard was the tone. Low, even, slightly formal in the way that creates a reset. The conversational equivalent of clearing your throat in a library. Kate's head turned toward him. In that half-second, Camilla's hand dropped. Louis sneezed and grabbed Kate's collar with both fists, like he was securing a lifeline. Nothing happened. That's the maddening truth of what I watched. Nothing happened. But something had been about to. And this man, this sergeant with his gorget tabs and his bearskin tucked under his arm like a hat at a garden party, had seen it coming from 40 feet away. From a sightline I didn't even know he had, and had ended it with 18 inches and 8 words. I stood very still. Marsh's eyes, when they finally moved from Kate to scan the corridor, found me in approximately 3/4 of a second. He didn't react. That was what undid me. He took me in. Lanyard, notebook half open, to shoes that were wrong for this floor, and he categorized me without expression, filed me, and returned his attention to the women. I'd been assessed and dismissed in the time it takes to exhale. Louis made a sound between a laugh and a complaint. Camilla said something soft that I also couldn't hear. Kate laughed, the real one, short and surprised, and the corridor relaxed the way a room relaxes when someone opens a window. I backed up the way I'd come, and I didn't take a note until I was outside, in the pale February light, standing on the gravel with my hands not quite steady. And what I wrote, the first thing, before the context, before the timeline, was this. He didn't stop what was happening. He changed what was possible. I didn't know yet what that distinction would cost me to understand. End of part 1. I found his record through a contact at the MOD who owed me a favor from a very bad week in 2019 that neither of us talks about. I'm Sergeant Declan Marsh, 38. Pembrokeshire originally, which explained something about the flatness of his vowels, the way consonants landed without sentiment. 14 years in the Blues and Royals before the lateral transfer to household protection duty. 2 operational tours, 1 commendation, 1 formal inquiry that was resolved, which in MOD language means resolved in his favor or buried deep enough that the distinction stopped mattering. Yet the commendation was for a thing in 2017 I couldn't get details on. The inquiry was for exceeding his remit during a diplomatic transit escort, exercising independent judgment in contradiction of standing orders, which is the formal language for he did something nobody told him to do and it worked, which is somehow also a problem. I sat with that for a long time. I'd requested an interview through the official press office, which is the same as posting a letter to a mountain. You do it to say you tried. What I got instead was a 10-minute conversation in a pub near Victoria that I arranged through the contact who arranged the MOD file, who arranged it through someone else in a chain of favors so long it had begun to resemble a social contract. Marsh arrived 7 minutes late. He ordered a lime and soda. He sat with his back to the wall. "I don't know why you think there's a story," he said, and he didn't say it defensively. He said it the way people say the bus is late, as fact as weather. "I was there," I said. "I know. You logged me. It's my job to know who's in a space." I asked him to walk me through his training, specifically the part that covered protection work, the difference between ceremonial and operational, the threshold for intervention. He looked at his drink for a moment. "You learn to read rooms," he said, "not people. Rooms. A person can lie. A room can't. The temperature changes. Sound patterns change. You read it before you think about it." "What did the corridor tell you?" He looked at me properly then, the kind of looking that doesn't blink on schedule. "That someone needed a moment not to happen," he said. I asked him why he'd moved to Kate's right rather than positioning between the two women. Something crossed his face. Not annoyance, not caution, and something more like the expression you get when someone asks you to explain how you catch a ball. The mechanics beneath instinct. "Because I wasn't there to stop Her Royal Highness from anything," he said. "I was there to give the princess somewhere to look." I wrote that down because I couldn't trust myself to remember it exactly. He watched me write it. "She was in a situation," he said, "where any response she gave was going to mean something it shouldn't. If she moved away, that means something. If she handed the baby over, that means something. If she kept talking on the phone, that means something. The whole room was a decision tree, and every branch had consequences." He took a drink, set the glass down with military precision. "So I gave her an exit, a neutral thing to respond to. She responded to it. The moment reset." "And the baby?" I asked. "Louis." He frowned, faint, barely there. "What about him? You didn't factor him in?" "The child was safe. But he was the—" I stopped. I wasn't sure what I was trying to say. "He was the reason for the tension." "No," Marsh said. "He was the symbol of it. That's different." I thought about that on the train home. I thought about it for 3 days. The distinction he was drawing between a thing that causes tension and a thing that represents it felt important in a way that I couldn't fully articulate, like a shape I could feel but not describe. Here is what I know about Declan Marsh from 14 minutes of observation and a pub conversation and a MOD file with a redacted section. He has a small scar at the outer edge of his left eyebrow that he got, according to the contact who set up the meeting, from a training exercise that went wrong in a way that was nobody's fault. He drinks lime and soda at midday. He takes the seat with the wall behind it automatically, without looking for it. Now, when he speaks, he uses the minimum number of words required, and the words he chooses are exact in the way that suggests he learned early that imprecision has consequences. He was not, I realized, reading me the way I was reading him. He had finished reading me in the corridor. In the pub, he was simply being present, waiting to see what I needed, deciding incrementally how much of it to give me. I asked him about the formal inquiry, the independent judgment citation. He didn't answer for 5 seconds. "There was a woman," he said finally, "in a transit vehicle. She needed to be moved separately from the party, and I moved her. Without authorization. With my judgment." He said it without apology, not defensive, not proud. A fact. She was frightened of something in the party that nobody else had noticed yet. Had she told you that? She hadn't told anyone anything. He stood up, while collecting his jacket with the efficiency of a man who has performed that gesture in 10,000 different rooms. She was standing slightly left of where she should have been, and her hands were in her pockets. He left. I sat with the lime and soda he hadn't finished, and thought about a woman with her hands in her pockets, standing slightly wrong in a transit vehicle in a year I couldn't source, and a man who'd noticed. I thought about Louis in that corridor, his hand around Kate's collar. so holding on. End of part 2. The piece never ran. I want to say that plainly before I explain it, because the explanation is the kind that sounds like excuse-making, and I have enough self-awareness left to know the difference. My editor at the time, a woman called Priya, who had been in royal coverage long enough to develop a specific kind of exhaustion that looks, from the outside, exactly like wisdom, read the first draft in 11 minutes and called me from her desk, even though I was 20 feet away. "This isn't a story," she said. "I was there." "I believe you were there. That's not the same thing." A royal protection officer deliberately intervened in what? She wasn't cruel. She was surgical. A grandmother reaching toward a grandchild. A woman in a hallway. You have a gesture, Theo. You have an interpretation of a gesture. And you have a very good profile of an interesting man who told you almost nothing. I sat across from her with my notes open, and the sense of someone who has walked very confidently into a room and is only now noticing there's no floor. "Run the profile," she said. "Marsh, his background, the inquiry, the instinct piece. That's a story. Without the corridor. Without the corridor. I didn't run it. That's the other thing I want to be plain about. I told myself it was because the corridor was the engine. Without it, the piece had no beating heart, just the anatomy of a man doing a job. But the truth, which I've been turning over with the unpleasant focus of a tongue on a loose tooth, is that I wasn't sure I trusted what I'd seen. Not because Marsh had lied to me. He hadn't. He'd been precise in the way of men who know that precision is its own form of withholding. But because I'd been there for 11 seconds, maybe 12, when I'd been at the wrong end of a 40-foot corridor in a building I wasn't supposed to be in, watching 2 women and a baby and a man whose job was to be invisible. And I had built an entire architecture of meaning on the foundation of 18 inches and a turned head. What if it was nothing? Or what if Camilla had simply leaned toward her step-grandchild the way women lean toward children, with the helpless magnetism of someone who remembers a weight that used to be carried? And Marsh had said something routine, a scheduling note, a reminder, the kind of ambient professional noise that fills palace corridors the way birdsong fills a garden. And Kate had glanced at him, and Louis had sneezed, and the corridor had been exactly what it appeared to be. A corridor? And I couldn't make myself believe that. Not because I needed it to be more, because of the way Marsh had found me. The scan, the categorization, the 3/4 of a second. A man performing a routine function in a routine corridor does not spend 3/4 of a second identifying a journalist with a press lanyard and incorrect shoes. He registers you and returns to neutral. What Marsh had done was different. A longer count, a more complete accounting, and the kind of attention you pay when the room is already compromised and you are building the full picture of what you're managing. He had been managing something. I went back through my notes from the pub 3 weeks later, after the piece had been killed, and I was ostensibly working on a piece about the Guards Museum that I wasn't emotionally present for. I found the line I'd underlined without remembering why. She was standing slightly left of where she should have been. He had moved her, the woman in the transit vehicle, because of a positional deviation, because she was standing wrong, because the room told him before she could. In the corridor, he had moved himself, not between the women, to Kate's right, creating a lateral anchor, something to orient toward that wasn't the moment she was inside, giving her a direction that wasn't forward or back. What would forward have been? I kept coming back to that. And to Louis, to the way a 6-month-old had his fist wrapped in his mother's collar. Not a grip of contentment, the grip of something else. Babies feel rooms too, in their pre-verbal antennae out way. They feel the electromagnetic field of adult emotion the way old people feel weather in their joints. What had Louis felt in that corridor? The piece is still in a folder on my desktop. 11 drafts, none of them run. I added to it last month after a source I can't name sent me a photograph. Not the one from the corridor. I have no photograph from the corridor. A different one. Marsh at a function, 18 months after the incident, standing post at a private family gathering at a location I won't specify. He's looking at something out of frame. His hands are clasped behind his back in the standard rest position. His expression is the standard palace glass expression. Unreadable, pleasant in the architectural sense, designed to communicate nothing. But he's standing slightly left of where he should be. I don't know what that means. I've been in this job long enough to know that the things I can't explain are usually the things that matter most, and that mattering most is not the same as being printable, and that some rooms hold their secrets in the oak paneling and the worn burgundy runner and the particular quality of light from a window positioned with deliberate precision, and that the man who understands all of this will always be one step ahead of the man trying to write it down. The baby is healthy. The women are whatever they have always been to each other. The crown proceeds. Marsh is still on duty. That photograph, that slight displacement, I don't know if he's protecting something or watching for it. End of part 3. Royal Guard intervenes as Camilla allegedly reaches for Louis in Kate's arms. A story in 3 parts.